Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to cover the newest book in the Rise and Fall series, Farilane. This is my favorite book so far set in Elan, so I'm excited to dig into it. I thought it would be fun to start out the video with some Easter eggs and then work our way up to the big concepts and storylines that affect Elan as a whole. But before we begin, while this video will obviously have spoilers for Farilane, it will also have spoilers for Nolan, the Legend series, Riyria Revelations, and Riyria Chronicles. But enough of an intro, let's get started with some Easter eggs. We learn that the region of Albernia got its name from the Alanrist ruins and the Burn River, which came together to form Alan Burn, which later became Albernia. Farilane mentions two fairy tales about dwarves, Gronbach and the Treasure of Neath, and the evil dwarf of the Crescent Forest. She says that in order to make the stories more readable, she rewrote them as The Dwarf and the Dairymaid and Little Wren and the Big Forest. That second one, Little Wren and the Big Forest, may sound familiar to some people, as it was actually a short story that Sullivan wrote in 2016 for the Unfettered 2 anthology. And even though it was written 6 years ago, if we dig up that story, the intro is indeed written by Princess Farilane. Throughout the book, Farilane often references a fictional pie, offering it as an incentive to various characters. At one point, she tells Virgil, "The pie is a lie." This is a reference to the "cake is a lie" from the Portal games. Early in the book, while in the village of Roche, Farilane meets a young farmer named Darren Surrett, whose father is the village elder. This is almost certainly an ancestor of Lord Darius Surrett, who would assist in the building up of the province of Albernia and founding the Surrett Knights, who would be stationed right next door in Blythen Castle. For the next Easter egg, the Teschler Colby utters the curse, "By the unholy twins." While this is a creative curse, it is not the first time we've heard it. We heard it 1,000 years later in Disappearance of Winter's Daughter from Evelyn Hemsworth, and we also heard it 1,000 years earlier by Zephyrin, who said it was something her mother, Moya, used to say. Knowing Moya's journey, this curse is referring to Drome and Farrell, and it is pretty fitting that Moya would invent a new curse that would span the millennia. While in Persepliquis, Kyle tells Farilane that he spent a year living in West Echo, assisting the poet Orentine Fallon with his masterwork, Elquin. Kyle even insinuates that he wrote most of it. This book title, Elquin, may sound familiar to some readers. That is because in Heir of Navron, we see Myron as he is transcribing Elquin from memory. While on the subject of books, Farilane mentions that one of the reasons she is writing her masterpiece, The Migration of Peoples, is because of the dwarven historical work The Forgotten Race by Dubrian Ash. Again, those titles should sound familiar, as in Heir of Navron, Myron finds 5 books saved from the fire in Persepliquis. Those 5 include both The Migration of Peoples and The Forgotten Race. One final Myron Easter egg. In Heir of Navron, Arista asks Myron if he knows where Persepliquis was located. He responds, "In every text, they always refer to everything else by way of it. Hashton was 25 leagues southeast of Persepliquis. Farrington, 100 leagues due north." So why is this an Easter egg? It's because on the map change between Nolan and Farilane, while the two maps are very similar, there have been 2 additional cities added to the Farilane map. You guessed it, Farrington and Haston. Next, let's talk about the Order of the Fallen. In Riyria Revelations, we learn that the Pickering ancestors learned their sword skills from the Order of the Fallen. We talk about this connection in our Hidden Implications of Nolan video, and we had theorized that Tech Chin may have started the Order of the Fallen and that we would learn more in Farilane. So, while we didn't learn too much more, we do learn that Tech Chin's sword was named Fallen. further confirming our thoughts about these events. We'll have to wait until Esarhaddon to see if we get more information though. Many people caught this next Easter egg, but I wanted to mention it just in case anyone missed it. When Mwandale, hiding as Sheldon, is in Zephron's house, Zephron picks up the fire poker and tries to hand it to him. This happens just before Mwandale's reveal. The reason that Zephron tries to hand him the poker is a callback to Nolan, when Mwandale controlled a fire poker with the art to threaten Zephron, Seymour, and Errol. Zephron is letting Mwandale know that she is aware of his true identity. In the throne room in Persepolis, there are statues of the emperors. They are described as being sculpted from white Hintarian marble. And while we haven't heard of this stone before, Hintarian seems to be a reference to the area just southeast of Persepolis, which will become the village of Hintendar, Hadrian's hometown. When Farilane is trying to decide what to call her building of books, she considers several different words such as bibliary, library, and bookerhouse. She also mentions another potential title, Laurlin, which she says is Belgic Lungrian for bookhouse. Laurlin is actually the Irish Gaelic word for library, which Sullivan included for the narrator of the book, Tim Gerard Reynolds, who is Irish. That wraps up the Easter eggs, but before we get to the big implications of Farilane, I do want to show some items because I love lists and maps. So first, because the book never lists them all together in order, here are the 10 events that Kyle prophesied. Farilane would become the only woman to win the Teshlor Shield of Bravery, that just outside of Farrington, she would kill the last Grenmorian while nearly being crushed to death, that she would write the definitive modern history of the world and name it The Migration of Peoples, that she would be the only survivor of the Vordic Typhoon, a feat accomplished by sailing a 10-foot sloop into a storm that had sunk a fleet, that she would destroy the Belgrade Kingdom. She would lead Mwandale to the Horn of Glendora. Mwandale would kill Empress Dowager Zephron. Estermon II would die on Farilane's 200th birthday. Farilane would incite a Teshlor revolt against the Emperor. And finally, Farilane would establish the Imperial Censarium Council and restore the art of magic to the world. Next, we learned about the 5 Frey fortresses during the Belgric War, which would have been nice information to have when I made the video covering the Belgric War, but we know them now, so let's take a look. They include Sion Hall, Meredith, which we learned was named after Alan Rist's younger sister, Alan Rist, Kralian, and Blythen. These formed the curved line of defense for Erevan against the Durg. Alright, now let's get to the big concepts and implications from Farilane. There are 2 that I want to focus on. The first one deals with Bran, Dibben, and Falkirk de Roche. As we know, in the 1st century, Bran, the son of Roan and Gifford, left Persepolis and founded the monks of Maribor. We already knew this, but in Farilane we learned a ton more about his storyline. Bran traveled around with his Book of Bryn, setting up monasteries and teaching his followers how to read. The monasteries he created included Brecon Moor, Isle of the Blue, Winds Abbey, Farview, and Whitehall. And while on his travels, he also visited Avon Partha. He believed, and rightly so, that there was a second Book of Bryn that had been taken, and he even eventually figured out what had taken it, though we don't know if he truly understood who Trylos is. Around this period, Suri died, and as she was the only shield between Bran and Nephron, who was emperor at the time, Bran did not return to Persepolis. Instead, he went to the Mystic Wood, seeking protection, where he met the Censars, magic users trained by Suri. One of these was Dibben. He and Dibben became friends, and they headed east, where they met Falkirk de Roche, a successful herdsman, and there the Falkirk Monastery was founded. At one point, they all became trapped at Barapathin, which we now know as Blytham Castle. We're not sure exactly what happens at this point. They could have been attacked by the row that existed there, or it could have been Trylos and Wandelay, as we know they both spent time there. Regardless, we believe Bran died there, but not before writing his letter that eventually makes it to Zephyrin, which included a lot of information, and ended with, Second Book of Bryn is underneath, in the hidden chamber, where the... So it seems Bran believed that he had found the book's exact location. Dibben was able to escape Barapathin and bring Bran's body and his original Book of Bryn back to the Mystic Wood, where he was buried and the Dibben Monastery was founded. So now that we've outlined Bran's story, let's fast forward 1800 years to Farilane. The first Book of Bryn that Farilane discovers near Blythium Castell is Falkirk de Roche's version. We do not know what happened to Falkirk in Barapathin, whether or not he survived or whether he was even truly himself at that point, though it is believed that he wrote the second section of the monks of Maribor's Codex, so we can guess that he probably did survive. But now let's fast forward another 1,000 years to the Riyria timeline. Falkirk comes up in both Death of Dulgath and Disappearance of Winter's Daughter. In Death of Dulgath, Royce and Hadrian are hired to steal a diary from Lady Martell for Lady Constantine. They succeed, but Lady Martell claims that the diary was never stolen. Then, in Disappearance of Winter's Daughter, we learn that Lady Martell had the diary of Falkirk de Roche, which she had apparently stolen from a monk. We learn this from Virgil Puck right before he is assassinated for unknown reasons. Then, at the end of Winter's Daughter, we find that Lady Martell has most likely died in Rochelle. It appears someone is still actively not wanting people to read Falkirk's diary. Also, in Disappearance of Winter's Daughter, we see the Falkirk Monastery ruins, as that is where Jenny was held captive, which we later learn also held the tomb of Falkirk beneath it. Overall, the story of Bran, Dibben, and Falkirk is an interesting, but still incomplete one. It teaches us that the second Book of Bryn was not destroyed by Trylos, and Bran believed he knew its exact whereabouts. We also know that something is happening during the Riyria timeline where someone is actively trying to cover up information regarding Falkirk, and perhaps the book's location. Could this be the Surret Knights, or Mwandelay, or perhaps even Trylos? The second and last topic that I think is important to cover is the endgame for Elan. Throughout all of the series, we've heard about how Turin has broken the world, and the overarching plot is his attempt to fix this, first of all, by gaining the forgiveness of his daughter. And while we have seen a world that could certainly be better, with less war between the races, there's certainly still good. We've also heard that the afterlife is supposedly broken, but again, even there it has its good places. So Turin's quest has seemed to be more of one to make the world better than it currently is. But Farilane paints a very different and darker picture. When Farilane asks Kyle what will happen if she chooses not to die, the conversation continues. Then you will live. She put her palms together and nodded, then set her fingertips to her lips. But everything will be destroyed as a result? Maybe not everything, he replied. Will humanity be spared? Kyle shook his head. The Frey? Another shake. So the dwarves will inherit the world. Afraid not. So we are talking a mass extinction event. But if that wasn't enough, the stakes are raised even more when Kyle states, and quite frankly, there's more at stake than merely the existence of humans, dwarves, Frey, and Gazelle. The future is darker than you can imagine. It is the nightmare that nightmares fear. I alone see it far in the distance, growing closer every day, and only I can stop it. I must be the one, because it's my fault. At this point, we are only limited by our imagination as to what this means. But let's look at what we do learn about this potential event. Kyle says that if he kills Farilane's brother, Nordian, in order to spare Farilane, not only would the world suffer the same terrible fate I'm attempting to stop, but it would happen a lot faster. Perhaps because this selfish act would prove to some important people that Kyle is not deserving of their forgiveness. So Kyle can't kill Nordian. But what if Farilane chooses to live? Well, Kyle states, "You would be the greatest ruler the world has ever known. You won't be able to help it. Your term as Empress would be the candle burning brightest just before darkness consumed all." And since he later says that in that timeline she would live for another 1,325 years, that puts the end of her reign and possibly the world around the year 3205, about 200 years after the Riyria events. Though, to be fair, the Riyria events probably would never have happened in that timeline. But I bring up all of these timelines to show that the world-ending events that Turin is trying to stop may not be as distant in the future as we think, especially if Turin was to fail somehow. Sullivan has publicly stated that a potential series would possibly occur in the future far after the events of Riyria, and I think the stage has been adequately set for such a series. That does flow well into the last thing I wanted to mention, which is that I do have a planned video series going over some of the craziest theories about what is in store for Elan, and you can be sure we will be talking about what we just discussed. Anyway, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for watching today's video. Be sure to subscribe and watch my other videos to learn more about the World of Elan and Riyria. Thanks!